The numbers didn't lie. That's what I kept telling myself as I stared at our bedroom calendar. My hands were trembling as I counted the days backward for the 20th time. Sarah's business trip to Singapore was from February 3rd to 17th. Her first morning sickness was on April 21st, and the ultrasound showed she was 6 weeks pregnant by then. I'm not a doctor, but I know enough about biology to understand that something wasn't adding up. 3 weeks into my self-imposed silence, I realized there was more to betrayal than just broken vows. The day Sarah told me she was pregnant, I was on top of the world. We had been trying for 2 years, enduring the disappointment of negative tests and dashed hopes month after month. I still remember how she came out of the bathroom that morning, eyes wide with disbelief and joy, holding that plastic stick like it was made of gold. I spun her around in our kitchen, both of us laughing with tears streaming down our faces. God, I was such a fool. It wasn't until later that evening, as I updated our shared calendar with her first prenatal appointment, that the first crack appeared in my perfect world. I noticed her Singapore trip dates while scrolling through February, and something made me pause. A small voice in my head started doing the math, and once it started, I couldn't make it stop. If she was 6 weeks pregnant in late April, conception would have been in early March. But in early March, we were apart. She was halfway across the world in a hotel room I'd never see, in a city I'd never visited, surrounded by people I'd never met. The next few days were a blur of obsessive calculations and secret Google searches. I checked and rechecked conception calculators, read medical websites about pregnancy dating, and drove myself crazy trying to find some mathematical error that would make everything okay. But the numbers remained stubborn, unmovable, like tombstones marking the death of my trust. I couldn't confront her, not yet, maybe not ever. Instead, I began to pull away, crafting an elaborate dance of avoidance that would have been impressive if it weren't so heartbreaking. I volunteered for late shifts at the architectural firm where I worked. I started sleeping in the guest room, claiming my back was acting up. I kept conversations brief and superficial, always finding reasons to be elsewhere. When she tried to talk about the pregnancy, Sarah noticed, of course. How could she not? The woman I had been married to for 5 years, who could read my moods like weather patterns, who knew every line of my face, could see the change in me. At first, she tried to bridge the growing gap between us. She'd leave little notes in my laptop bag, cook my favorite meals, and try to engage me in conversations about baby names and nursery colors, but I couldn't. I couldn't bear to participate in planning a future built on lies. The text messages started 2 weeks into my retreat. James, please talk to me. What's wrong? I miss you. I read each one multiple times but never responded. Each message was like a knife twisting in my gut because beneath her words, I could hear the unasked question. Do you know? Then came the voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. James, you're scaring me. Whatever it is, we can work through it. Please don't throw away what we have. I saved every message, but couldn't bring myself to listen to them more than once. Her voice, thick with tears and fear, threatened to break my resolve. It was her brother, Marcus, who finally forced the issue. He showed up at my office one rainy Tuesday afternoon. His usual easygoing demeanor was replaced by something harder, more urgent. I tried to wave him off with excuses about deadlines, but he planted himself in front of my desk and crossed his arms. You need to come home, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Whatever's going on with you, this isn't the way to handle it. She's pregnant, for God's sake. Do you have any idea what the stress could do to the baby? The baby, those words hit me like a physical blow. In all my pain and anger, I've been thinking of the pregnancy only as evidence of betrayal, not as a developing life, a life that, regardless of its conception, was innocent in all this. The realization made me feel slightly sick. Marcus, there are things you don't understand, I managed to say. Then help me understand, he shot back. Because from where I'm standing, my sister's husband has turned into a ghost, and she's falling apart trying to figure out why. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. How could I explain my suspicions without making them real? How could I maintain the fragile shell of ignorance that was keeping me from completely breaking down? But Marcus wasn't finished. She collapsed this morning. The world stopped. Dehydration and exhaustion, the doctor said. She hasn't been sleeping or eating properly for weeks. Can't imagine why. His sarcasm was razor-sharp. She's stable now, but she's still at St. Mary's. Thought you might want to know, seeing as you're still technically her husband. The word technically landed like a slap. I was on my feet before I realized I'd moved, grabbing my coat with shaking hands. The drive to the hospital was a blur, my mind racing between concern for Sarah and the burning questions that had been consuming me for weeks. I found her in a private room on the 3rd floor. She was asleep when I entered, looking small and pale against the white hospital sheets. And 4 dripped steadily beside her bed, and a fetal heart monitor beeped with reassuring regularity. The sound made something twist inside my chest. I sat in the chair beside her bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. How many nights had I watched her sleep over the years, marveling at how lucky I was. Now, each breath seemed to carry the weight of unspoken secrets. Her eyes fluttered open after a few minutes, focusing slowly on my face. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then her hand moved toward mine, hesitant, questioning. I surprised myself by taking it. "I thought you weren't coming back," she whispered, her voice rough with sleep and tears that I swallowed hard. "I had to. Why did you leave in the first place?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with all the things we hadn't been saying. I looked down at our joined hands, then at the subtle curve of her stomach visible beneath the hospital gown. The words I'd been holding back for weeks finally broke free. "The baby," I said, my voice barely audible. "The timing. Your trip to Singapore. It can't." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like relief, then hurt, then anger. "You think I cheated on you?" she asked. "The dates don't add up, Sarah. I've checked them 100 times. You were in Singapore when what?" She cut me off. "When you think conception happened, based on what, James? Your Google searches." This passage is deeply emotional and introspective, filled with raw vulnerability and a sense of regret. The internal struggle of James is palpable as he wrestles with the fears and assumptions that led to his silence. His journey of coming to terms with his mistakes, confronting his fears, and ultimately choosing love and communication is powerful. I love the way the story shows that the real betrayal here wasn't external. It was a self-inflicted isolation, his refusal to confront the truth and communicate openly with Sarah. It's a reminder that relationships, especially in moments of uncertainty or fear, require courage, honesty, and openness. Your writing does a great job of making the reader empathize with James' turmoil and Sarah's emotional journey as well. The way she shows her own strength in confronting him, despite everything, adds a beautiful layer to their relationship. The ending is uplifting, full of hope, and underscores the idea that healing is possible, even after deep emotional wounds, as long as there's mutual effort.